I was standing in my driveway at 6 in the morning, staring at the empty posts where my emergency access signs had been just yesterday, when I realized this HOA dispute was about to become a full-blown war. My name is Donovan, and I had moved to the Meadowbrook Estates community in Franklin County, Ohio, about 8 months ago. The house was perfect for my needs. I worked as a freelance software developer from home, and the property had everything I wanted. A quiet cul-de-sac location, a spacious garage for my woodworking hobby, and most importantly, it backed up to county land with emergency vehicle access. That last part mattered because my wife had passed away 3 years ago from a sudden cardiac event, and the paramedics had arrived too late because they could not navigate our old neighborhood's confusing layout. When I bought this house, I made absolutely certain that emergency services could reach me quickly. The property deed came with an easement that granted emergency vehicle access through the back of my lot, connecting to the county maintenance road. It was all documented, legal, and part of the reason I had paid extra for this particular house. I had installed professional-grade reflective signs marking the emergency access route, complete with the county-approved markings and my address clearly visible. These were not cheap decorations. They were potentially life-saving markers that cost me nearly $800 to have professionally installed according to county specifications. Now they were gone. I walked around to the back of my property, my boots crunching on the frost-covered grass. The signs that had been bolted to sturdy metal posts were completely removed. Not vandalized, not knocked over, but professionally extracted. Even the concrete footings had been dug up and filled in with fresh dirt. Someone had put effort into this. My phone rang. It was my neighbor, Tom Richardson, a retired firefighter who lived 2 houses down. "Isaac, you see what they did?" His voice was tight with anger. "I am looking at it right now. When did this happen?" "Last night around 8. I saw the HOA truck out there with some contractor. I thought they were doing routine maintenance, but then I saw them loading your signs into the truck bed. I tried to call you, but it went to voicemail. I had been at a client dinner in Columbus the previous evening and had silenced my phone. Did you get any photos?" "Better. I got video." "The whole thing. Send it to me. I am going to need it." After hanging up with Tom, I immediately called the Franklin County Emergency Services Department. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, who transferred me to Deputy Chief Martinez. He was not happy. "Mr. Donovan, those signs are required by county code for properties with emergency access easements. Removing them is a violation of County Ordinance 4722B. Who removed them?" According to my neighbor, it was the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. There was a pause. "The HOA removed county-mandated emergency access signage. That is a serious violation. I am sending an inspector out today. Do not reinstall anything yet. We need to document this properly." The inspector arrived at 10. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she carried a tablet and camera, documenting everything with methodical precision. Tom came over with his video footage, which she watched 3 times, taking notes. "This is clear-cut," she said. "The HOA violated county code by removing mandated emergency signage. The video shows premeditation and deliberate removal. I am issuing a violation notice immediately, and this will be escalated to the county attorney's office." "What kind of penalties are we talking about?" I asked. "For this type of violation?" "Initial fines start at $10,000, and they can escalate quickly if not remedied within 72 hours. Plus, they will be liable for reinstallation costs and any additional penalties the county attorney decides to pursue." She handed me copies of her report and left. I stood there holding the documents, trying to process how the HOA could be this stupid. Then, I remembered who ran the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board, Karen Whitfield. I had met Karen exactly twice since moving in, and both encounters had been unpleasant. She was a woman in her late 40s, with an aggressive blonde bob haircut, and the kind of perpetually pinched expression that suggested she spent most of her time looking for things to complain about. Our first meeting occurred during my second week in the neighborhood when she appeared at my door with a clipboard and a list of 17 violations she claimed my property had. These included my mailbox being the wrong shade of black, my lawn being a quarter-inch too tall, and my refusal to remove a decorative wind chime that apparently violated the community's noise ordinance. I had politely but firmly told her that I would review the actual HOA bylaws and respond in writing. When I did review them, I discovered that exactly 3 of her 17 claims had any basis in the actual rules, and even those were stretches. I fixed the legitimate issues and ignored the rest. Karen did not like being ignored. Our second meeting happened when she tried to fine me $500 for parking my truck in my own driveway overnight. According to her interpretation of the rules, all vehicles had to be garaged between 10 at night and 6 in the morning. When I pointed out that the actual bylaw said no inoperable vehicles could be stored in driveways, and my truck was perfectly operational, she had turned red and threatened to put a lien on my property. I had responded by threatening to contact an attorney. She had backed down, but I could see the hatred in her eyes. Now she had escalated to removing emergency access signs. This was beyond petty HOA nonsense. This was dangerous. I needed to understand her reasoning, so I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting, which according to the community calendar was scheduled for that evening at 7. Perfect timing. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a beige building that matched every other structure in the development. I arrived at 6:55 and took a seat in the back row. About 20 other homeowners were scattered throughout the room, most looking bored or resigned. Karen sat at the head table with 2 other board members. Gerald Thompson, a nervous-looking accountant in his 60s, and Patricia Morrison, a real estate agent who always seemed to be checking her phone. Karen was shuffling papers and talking to Patricia in a low voice, occasionally glancing around the room with her usual expression of barely contained irritation. At exactly 7, Karen banged a gavel that seemed far too large for the occasion. This meeting of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association is now called to order. First order of business, we need to discuss the ongoing issues with non-compliant signage in the community. I sat up straighter. She was actually going to address this publicly. Over the past month, we have received numerous complaints from residents about unauthorized signs on private property. These signs create visual clutter and detract from our community's carefully maintained aesthetic standards. Yesterday, we took action to remove the most egregious examples of this violation. My hand shot up. Karen's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Mr. Donovan, I should have known you would be here. Do you have a question?" I stood up. "Yes." "Did the unauthorized signs you removed include the emergency access markers on my property?" "Those signs were not approved by the Architectural Review Committee and violated our community guidelines regarding size, placement, and aesthetic standards." "Yes, they were removed." The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. Those signs were mandated by Franklin County Code for properties with emergency access easements. They were professionally installed according to county specifications. Did you bother to check with the county before removing them? Karen's face was turning pink. The HOA has the authority to regulate all signage within the community. Your property deed is subject to our covenants, conditions, and restrictions. You should have submitted a request to the Architectural Review Committee before installing those signs. The county does not care about your Architectural Review Committee. Those signs are required by law. By removing them, you violated County Ordinance 4722B. Gerald leaned toward Karen, whispering something urgently. She waved him away. If you had a problem with our decision, you should have followed the proper dispute resolution process outlined in the HOA bylaws. Coming here and making accusations is not appropriate. I am not making accusations. I am stating facts. The county sent an inspector this morning. They documented the violation and issued a notice. The HOA is now facing significant fines. That got Patricia's attention. She put down her phone and stared at Karen. What is he talking about? He is exaggerating, Karen said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. The county has no authority over HOA decisions regarding community aesthetics. I pulled out my phone and opened the email Inspector Chen had sent me, which included the official violation notice. I have the county's violation report right here. Would you like me to read it out loud, or would you prefer to continue pretending this is not a serious problem? Several homeowners had their phones out now, recording the exchange. Karen noticed, and her jaw tightened. This meeting is not the appropriate forum for your personal grievances, Mr. Donovan. If you have documentation, you can submit it to the board for review. The county already submitted their documentation. To you, certified mail, it should have arrived this afternoon. Gerald whispered to Karen again, more urgently this time. She stood abruptly. We are going to take a short recess. Board members, please join me in the office. The three of them disappeared into a side room. I could hear raised voices through the thin door, though I could not make out the words. The other homeowners started talking among themselves, and several approached me asking questions. I gave them the basic facts. The signs were required by county code, the HOA removed them without authorization, and the county had issued a violation. After 15 minutes, the board members returned. Karen looked like she had been sucking on lemons, and Gerald appeared on the verge of a panic attack. Only Patricia seemed relatively calm, though she was typing rapidly on her phone. After reviewing the situation, Karen said stiffly, we have decided to table the discussion of signage pending further research into county requirements. This meeting is adjourned. She banged the gavel again and started gathering her papers. I walked up to the head table. Karen, this is not going away. The county gave you 72 hours to fix this, starting from this morning. That means you have until Thursday at 10. If you do not reinstall those signs and resolve the violation, the fines are going to get much worse. We will handle it, she said without looking at me. How? Are you going to argue with the county inspector? Tell them that your aesthetic standards are more important than emergency vehicle access. She finally looked up, and the hatred in her eyes was palpable. You have been a problem since you moved into this community, Mr. Donovan. You refuse to follow rules. You question authority at every turn, and now you are trying to undermine the board with scare tactics. We know what we are doing. If you knew what you were doing, you would not have removed county-mandated emergency signage. But please, continue making this worse. I am sure the other homeowners will appreciate it when the HOA's legal fees and fines come out of their dues. I left before she could respond. Several homeowners followed me out, asking for copies of the county's documentation. I sent them the inspector's report, knowing that by morning, everyone in the development would know about Karen's mistake. What I did not expect was how quickly Karen would try to retaliate. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a notice of violation from the HOA, claiming that my property was in breach of 17 different community standards. The list was absurd. My grass was allegedly too long, my mailbox was the wrong color, my house numbers were not the approved font, my driveway had oil stains, my gutters were dirty, my front door wreath was not seasonally appropriate, and on and on. Each violation carried a $50 fine, for a total of $850. This was clearly retaliation, and it was clearly Karen's work. The notice was dated yesterday, before the HOA meeting, but the envelope had been delivered overnight. She had prepared this in advance, probably planning to use it as leverage. I photographed everything and called my attorney, David Brenner, who I had worked with on my house purchase. He laughed when I read him the list of violations. "Isaac, this is textbook harassment. If you want, we can file a complaint and probably get the whole thing dismissed. But I have a better idea. Let the county process play out first. If the HOA does not fix the emergency sign situation by Thursday, the county is going to come down hard on them. That is going to put the entire board under scrutiny. Then we can address this retaliation as part of a larger pattern of misconduct." "You think it is going to get that far?" I know Karen Whitfield. She was the selling agent on a property I worked on 2 years ago, and she was a nightmare. She does not back down, even when she is obviously wrong. She is going to fight the county on this, and she is going to lose badly. David was right. Thursday morning came and went with no sign of the emergency access markers being reinstalled. I called Inspector Chen at 11. "Mr. Donovan, I was just about to call you. The HOA missed the deadline. Their attorney sent a letter arguing that the HOA's covenants supersede county code, which is legally nonsense. The county attorney is escalating this. The initial fine is now $25,000, and it is going to increase by $5,000 per day until compliance is achieved." $25,000. I thought it started at 10. It does, but the fine doubled because they attempted to argue rather than comply. Plus, we are adding penalties for the delay. This is a public safety issue, Mr. Donovan. Emergency vehicle access is not optional. The HOA's attorney should know better than to make frivolous legal arguments. What happens next? The county is sending a formal demand letter today, along with the updated fine notice. If they do not comply within 48 hours, we will seek a court order. And if they violate a court order, we are looking at potential contempt charges and criminal penalties. This was escalating faster than I had anticipated. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part was worried about what it would mean for the community. The fines would ultimately be paid out of the HOA's reserves, which meant higher dues for everyone. That afternoon, Tom came over looking concerned. "Isaac, did you hear about the emergency board meeting tonight?" "No. What is going on?" Karen called it an hour ago. "She is trying to rally support against the county. She has been going door to door telling people that you orchestrated this whole thing to attack the HOA, and that if everyone stands together, they can fight the fines. That is insane. I did not remove my own signs and then report it." "I know that, and anyone with half a brain knows that, but Karen is convincing. She is telling people that the county is overstepping its authority, and that if the HOA backs down on this, it will set a precedent that destroys property values." I rubbed my temples. She is going to bankrupt the HOA. That is what I am worried about. Look, I am going to the meeting tonight to set the record straight. I have the video footage and I am going to show everyone exactly what happened, but you might want to be there too. The emergency meeting was packed. Nearly every homeowner in the development showed up, which was about 80 people crowded into a clubhouse designed for 40. I stood in the back again, next to Tom. Karen started the meeting without the usual formalities. Thank you all for coming on short notice. As many of you have heard, the county is attempting to fine our HOA over a signage dispute. This is a direct attack on our community's autonomy and our property values. If we allow the county to dictate what signs can be displayed in our neighborhood, we lose control over the aesthetic standards that make Meadowbrook Estates a desirable place to live. Several people nodded, though many looked confused. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Karen, I heard the signs were for emergency vehicle access. Is that true? The signs in question were oversized and not submitted for architectural review. Mr. Donovan installed them without permission. Tom stood up. That is not what happened, and you know it. Karen's face flushed. Mr. Richardson, you are out of order. No, you are out of order. You removed county-mandated emergency signs from Isaac's property without authorization. I have video proof. He held up his phone. Should I play it for everyone? The room erupted in conversation. Karen banged her gavel repeatedly. That video does not tell the whole story. The signs were not properly documented. Yes, they were, I called out from the back. I have copies of the easement documents, the county approval, and the professional installation certification. The signs were completely legal and required by county code. The HOA had no authority to remove them. Patricia Morrison suddenly stood up. Karen, can I see the legal opinion from our attorney? The one that said we could remove the signs. Karen shuffled papers. It is in the files. I want to see it now. This affects all of us financially. Patricia, this is not the time to question board decisions. We need to present a united front. United front. Karen, if what Isaac is saying is true, you just cost us $25,000 because you did not bother to check county code before removing safety equipment. That is not something I am willing to defend. Gerald finally spoke up, his voice shaking. I told you we should consult with the attorney before taking action. I told you we needed to verify the county requirements. You said it was just HOA business and we had full authority. The meeting devolved into chaos. Homeowners were shouting questions. Karen was banging her gavel, and Patricia was demanding to see documentation that apparently did not exist. Finally, a man I recognized as Marcus Chen, a lawyer who lived on Oakwood Drive, stood up and called for order. Everyone, please. I practice municipal law, and I can tell you with certainty that county emergency access codes supersede HOA covenants. There is no legal debate here. The HOA violated county law, and now we are all going to pay for it. The only question is how much. What do you mean, how much? Someone asked. Marcus turned to Karen. How much are the current fines and what is the timeline for compliance? Karen said nothing. Patricia grabbed the papers from in front of Karen and read them. Her face went pale. $25,000, increasing by $5,000 per day until we comply. And if we do not comply within 48 hours, the county is seeking a court order. She looked at Karen with undisguised anger. When were you planning to tell us this? I was trying to find a legal solution before alarming everyone, Karen said defensively. A legal solution. Karen, there is no legal solution. We broke the law. We need to fix it immediately and pray the county shows mercy on the fines. Marcus stepped forward. I am calling for an emergency vote to remove the current board and install an interim leadership committee to resolve this situation. All in favor. The response was overwhelming. Nearly every hand in the room went up. Karen looked around in shock as her power evaporated in real time. You cannot do this. There are procedures, bylaws that must be followed. Actually, Marcus said, The bylaws allow for removal of board members by a 2/3 majority vote in cases of gross negligence or misconduct. I would say costing the HOA tens of thousands of dollars in avoidable fines qualifies. All opposed. Karen, Gerald, and 2 of Karen's friends raised their hands. Everyone else remained in favor of the removal. Motion passes. Karen Whitfield, Gerald Thompson, and Patricia Morrison are removed from the board effective immediately. I am appointing myself, Tom Richardson, and Jennifer Santos as interim board members until proper elections can be held. Jennifer Santos was a paralegal who lived near me. She nodded grimly and came to the front. "First order of business," Marcus said. "We need to contact the county immediately and arrange for the emergency signs to be reinstalled. Mr. Donovan, do you have the specifications and installation requirements?" "I have everything. I can send it to you tonight." "Good. We will have a contractor out there tomorrow morning." Second, we need to contact the county attorney and request a meeting to discuss the fines. If we show immediate good faith effort to comply, we might be able to get the penalties reduced. The meeting continued for another hour as the new interim board worked through the immediate crisis. Karen sat in her former seat, arms crossed, glaring at everyone. When the meeting finally adjourned, she stormed out without speaking to anyone. I approached Marcus and Tom. "Thank you for stepping up." Marcus shook his head. "This is a mess. Karen should never have been given authority over anything more important than a bake sale. But we will get it sorted out. The important thing is getting those signs back up and preventing any more damage." True to his word, Marcus had a contractor at my property at 8 the next morning. By noon, new emergency access signs were installed, even nicer than the originals, with upgraded reflective coating and LED lights for night visibility. Inspector Chen came by to verify the installation and took detailed photographs. "This is good work," she said. "I will submit my report to the county attorney this afternoon. The immediate violation is resolved." "What about the fines?" I asked. "That is above my pay grade, but between you and me, the fact that you removed the problematic board members and fixed the issue within 24 hours is going to work in your favor. The county is not trying to bankrupt communities. We just want compliance." The following Tuesday, Marcus attended a meeting with the Franklin County Attorney's Office. I went with him, along with Tom and Jennifer, as representatives of the community. The county attorney was a woman named Rachel Foster, and she reviewed the case file while we sat in uncomfortable chairs in her office. "Let me make sure I understand the timeline," she said. "The HOA removed required emergency signage on May 15th. You reported it immediately. We issued a violation notice on May 16th with a 72-hour compliance deadline. The HOA missed that deadline and attempted to argue legal authority they do not have, which escalated the fines. Then the community removed the responsible board members and achieved compliance within 24 hours. Is that accurate?" "Yes," Marcus said. "The former board president, Karen Whitfield, acted without proper authorization and ignored both the county requirements and the advice of other board members. As soon as the community became aware of the situation's severity, we took immediate corrective action." Rachel nodded. "I have reviewed the video evidence provided by Mr. Richardson. It clearly shows deliberate removal of the signage. I have also reviewed the HOA's bylaws and confirmed that Miss Whitfield exceeded her authority. Under normal circumstances, the fines would be $50,000 at this point." My stomach dropped. $50,000 would devastate the HOA's finances. "However," Rachel continued, "the county recognizes that the current board acted swiftly and responsibly to remedy the situation. We are willing to reduce the fine to $10,000, which represents the initial penalty without escalation, plus administrative costs. This is contingent on 3 conditions. First, the HOA must adopt written policies requiring county code compliance checks before any removal of property owner installations. Second, Ms. Whitfield must be permanently barred from serving on the HOA board. And third, the HOA must issue a formal apology to Mr. Donovan and reimburse him for any costs related to this incident. I exhaled slowly. 10,000 was still significant, but it was manageable. Marcus nodded. We accept those terms. I will draft the policy changes today, and we will hold a vote at the next general meeting to formally adopt them. Miss Whitfield has already been removed from the board, and I will ensure the bylaws are amended to prevent her return. Rachel pulled out a settlement agreement. Sign here, and we will consider this matter resolved. But let me be clear. If anything like this happens again, the county will not be lenient. Emergency access is not negotiable. We all signed. Walking out of the county building, I felt the tension that had been building for a week finally release. Well, Tom said, that could have been worse. It still cost the community $10,000 because Karen could not handle being told no, Jennifer said. Plus, whatever we are spending to reimburse Isaac. The sign installation cost me $800, I said, and maybe another couple hundred in time and phone calls. I am not trying to profit from this. We will still reimburse you properly, Marcus said. And honestly, you did the community a favor. Karen has been overstepping her authority for years. This was just the first time she did something with actual legal consequences. If you had not pushed back, who knows what she would have done next. The HOA held a general meeting the following Thursday to vote on the settlement terms and policy changes. The turnout was even larger than the emergency meeting, with people clearly invested in the outcome. Marcus presented the settlement agreement, explained the reduced fine, and outlined the new policies. The vote was unanimous in favor. Then came the formal apology. Marcus read it aloud. The Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association formally apologizes to Isaac Donovan for the unauthorized removal of county-mandated emergency access signage from his property. This action was taken without proper authority or due diligence, and it violated both county code and Mr. Donovan's property rights. The HOA takes full responsibility for this error and commits to implementing policies to prevent similar incidents in the future. People applauded. It felt surreal to receive a standing ovation for something that should never have been necessary. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to apologize for not speaking up sooner about Karen's behavior. One woman, elderly Mrs. Patterson, confessed that Karen had been harassing her for months over a bird feeder that allegedly violated HOA rules. I was so afraid of her, Mrs. Patterson said. I am on a fixed income, and I could not afford the fines she was threatening. Seeing you stand up to her gave me hope that maybe things could change. That conversation stuck with me. This was never really about signs or county codes. It was about power and accountability. Karen had built a little fiefdom where she could bully people without consequences, and it took a public safety violation to finally bring her down. But Karen was not done yet. 2 weeks after the settlement, I received a letter from an attorney named Philip Grayson, representing Karen Whitfield personally. The letter claimed that I had defamed Karen during the HOA meetings, that I had conspired with other homeowners to orchestrate her removal, and that I was responsible for damaging her reputation in the community. She was demanding $50,000 in damages and a public apology. I called David Brenner immediately. He read the letter and started laughing. "Isaac, this is one of the most frivolous demand letters I have ever seen. Karen is trying to intimidate you into silence. She has no case whatsoever. Everything you said about her was documented fact, and you have witnesses to confirm that you did not defame her. She defamed herself through her actions. So, what do I do? Ignore it. If she actually files a lawsuit, which I doubt, we will destroy it in court. But she is probably just hoping you will panic and pay her to go away." I took David's advice and did not respond to the letter. A week later, Tom told me that Karen had sent similar letters to him, Marcus, and Jennifer. All of us compared notes and confirmed that they were identical threats with no substance. Then things got interesting. Jennifer, using her paralegal skills, did some research into Karen's history with the HOA. What she found was disturbing. Over the past 3 years, Karen had issued more than 500 violation notices to homeowners, collected over $70,000 in fines, and used HOA funds to hire contractors for unnecessary projects, many of which were owned by her brother-in-law. Jennifer presented her findings to the interim board, and we realized that the emergency sign issue was just the tip of the iceberg. Karen had essentially been running a scheme to generate fine revenue and funnel HOA money to her relatives. Marcus contacted a forensic accountant to audit the HOA's books. The audit took 3 weeks and revealed that approximately $35,000 in HOA funds had been misappropriated over the past 3 years through inflated contractor invoices and kickback arrangements. This was no longer just an HOA dispute. This was fraud. Marcus reported the findings to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. They opened an investigation, and 2 weeks later, detectives showed up at Karen's house with a warrant. I watched from my living room window as they led her out in handcuffs, her face red with rage and humiliation. The local news picked up the story. Former HOA president arrested for embezzlement. Karen's mugshot was plastered across the evening broadcast, and the reporters detailed how she had abused her position to steal from her neighbors. The prosecutor's case was strong. Karen's brother-in-law, the contractor, cooperated with investigators and provided evidence of the kickback scheme. Bank records showed suspicious transfers. Emails revealed that Karen had deliberately created violations to generate fine income. In September, Karen Whitfield pleaded guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of office. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to repay the stolen funds plus penalties, totaling over $60,000. Her attorney, Philip Grayson, was reprimanded by the Bar Association for sending the frivolous demand letters on her behalf. The HOA used the restitution money to replenish its reserves and rolled back many of the excessive rules Karen had implemented. Marcus, Tom, and Jennifer were elected to permanent board positions in October, running on a platform of transparency and reasonable governance. Mrs. Patterson put her bird feeder back up, and no one bothered her about it. As for me, I finally felt safe in my home. The emergency access signs remained in place, brighter and more visible than ever. I knew that if something happened, if I needed help, the paramedics would be able to find me quickly. That peace of mind was worth all the stress and conflict. One evening in early December, I was sitting on my back deck watching the sun set when Tom came over with 2 beers. "Thought you might want company," he said, handing me a bottle. "Thanks. It has been a crazy few months." That's an understatement. You know, a lot of people in the community are grateful for what you did. Karen made life miserable for a lot of folks, but everyone was too scared to fight back. You stood up when it mattered. I just wanted my signs left alone. I never expected it would uncover embezzlement and land someone in prison." Tom laughed. "That is how it works sometimes. You pull on one thread and the whole thing unravels, but the community is better for it. We have actual leadership now, people who care about doing the right thing instead of throwing their weight around." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our beers and watching the sky turn orange and purple. In the distance, I could see the emergency access route, clearly marked and properly maintained. My property value had probably not changed at all through this whole ordeal, but something more important had changed. I was part of a community again, not just a homeowner in a development. People looked out for each other. When Mrs. Patterson needed help raking leaves, 3 neighbors showed up with tools. When the Santos family's car broke down, Tom organized a carpool for their kids. When the new residents on Maple Street had questions about the neighborhood, I welcomed them and gave them the honest rundown of how things worked. The HOA became what it was supposed to be, a tool for maintaining common areas and organizing community events, not a weapon for petty tyrants to wield against their neighbors. In February, almost a year after I had moved in, the community threw its first annual winter barbecue. Someone had the idea to make it a celebration of the new era of Meadowbrook Estates. Marcus gave a short speech about accountability and community values. Jennifer announced that the HOA reserves were fully restored and that dues would actually decrease next year. Tom presented me with a plaque that read, "In appreciation for standing up for what's right." I was embarrassed by the attention, but I accepted the plaque graciously. Later, when people had dispersed into smaller conversations, a young couple approached me. They had just moved into the house 3 doors down from mine. "Mr. Donovan," the man said, "we heard about what happened with the HOA last year. We almost did not buy in this community because of the reviews online about the old board president. But when we saw that things had changed, that people had stood up and fixed the problems, we decided to take a chance. We just wanted to say thank you for making this a place where we feel safe raising our kids." His wife nodded. "Our daughter has epilepsy. Having clear emergency access is really important to us. Knowing that the community takes that seriously made all the difference." I shook their hands, feeling a lump in my throat. This was what it was all about. Not revenge against Karen, not winning some petty dispute, but making sure that people could live safely and peacefully in their homes. As the barbecue wound down and people started heading home, I walked back to my house and looked at the emergency access signs glowing softly in the twilight. They were just signs, metal and reflective paint, but they represented something much bigger. They represented the idea that some things matter more than aesthetics and property values. They represented the principle that rules exist to serve people, not to control them. And they represented a community that learned to hold its leaders accountable and demand better. I went inside, feeling content in a way I had not felt since before my wife passed. The house was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, not a lonely one. I knew my neighbors. I trusted my HOA board. I felt secure. The legal papers from the county settlement were filed in my office, along with the formal apology and the reimbursement check. I rarely looked at them, but I kept them as a reminder of what had happened and what I had learned. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing. And sometimes, a simple dispute over signs can expose corruption and change an entire community for the better. I made myself dinner, watched some television, and went to bed at a reasonable hour. Through my bedroom window, I could see the glow of the emergency access signs, standing guard in the darkness. Everything was exactly as it should be. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call from Marcus. His voice was excited, almost breathless. "Isaac, you are not going to believe this. The story about Karen and the HOA just went viral. Some national news outlet picked it up, and now we are getting calls from reporters and other HOA communities asking for advice on how to handle similar situations." I groaned. I really do not want to be the face of some anti-HOA movement. Too late. You already are. But listen, this is actually a good thing. There are thousands of communities dealing with the same problems we had. People being bullied by power-hungry board members, excessive fines, arbitrary rules. Your story shows that it is possible to fight back and win. What do you want me to do? A reporter from a major cable news network wants to interview you tomorrow. I told them I would check with you first. It is completely your choice, but I think it could help a lot of people. I thought about Mrs. Patterson and her bird feeder. I thought about the young couple with the daughter who had epilepsy. I thought about all the other people in other communities who might be suffering under petty tyrants like Karen. "Okay," I said, "I will do the interview." The interview aired the following week. The reporter framed it as a David versus Goliath story, highlighting how one homeowner's refusal to back down had exposed corruption and reformed an entire HOA. They showed footage of my house, the emergency access signs, and clips from the board meetings. They interviewed Tom, Marcus, and even Mrs. Patterson, who tearfully explained how afraid she had been of Karen. The segment ended with the reporter asking me what advice I would give to others dealing with similar situations. I thought carefully before answering. Document everything. Know your rights. Do not be afraid to escalate when you are in the right. And remember that HOAs are supposed to serve the community, not rule over it. If your board has forgotten that, it is up to the homeowners to remind them. The response was overwhelming. I received hundreds of emails from people across the country sharing their own HOA horror stories and asking for advice. Some were dealing with issues similar to mine. Others were facing foreclosure over unpaid fines for trivial violations. A few were dealing with outright fraud. I could not help them all, but I did what I could. I shared the legal strategies that had worked for me. I connected people with attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes. I encouraged them to organize with their neighbors and demand accountability. Within a few months, I heard back from several of the people I had helped. A community in Arizona had successfully recalled their board after discovering financial irregularities. A man in Florida had fought back against a fine for painting his house the wrong shade of white and won. A woman in Texas had organized her neighbors to rewrite their HOA bylaws, eliminating dozens of oppressive rules. Each success felt like a small victory against the culture of bullying and overreach that had become too common in American HOAs. By the summer, things in Meadowbrook Estates had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new board was functioning well, with monthly meetings that were actually productive rather than contentious. Homeowners were engaged and informed. The community was thriving. Karen was serving her sentence at the Women's Correctional Facility in Marysville. I did not think about her often, but when I did, I felt a mixture of pity and satisfaction. She had brought everything on herself through greed and arrogance. Maybe prison would teach her humility, though I doubted it. In August, I received a letter from the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. They were awarding me a commendation for civic engagement and commitment to public safety. The ceremony was scheduled for the following month. I almost did not go. I had never been comfortable with public recognition. But Tom convinced me that it mattered, that accepting the award sent a message that ordinary citizens could make a difference. The ceremony was held in the county administration building. I wore a suit that felt too formal and stood awkwardly while a commissioner read a proclamation praising my actions. They presented me with a plaque and a certificate. Photographers took pictures. People applauded. Afterward, Inspector Sarah Chen approached me with a smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Donovan. You earned this." "I just wanted my signs to stay up," I said, repeating what had become my standard response. "Maybe, but you did a lot more than that." "Do you know how many emergency access routes in Franklin County were being blocked or poorly marked before your case went public?" "Dozens. Your story prompted a county-wide audit, and we have been working with HOAs across the region to ensure compliance." "You probably saved lives without even knowing it." That thought stayed with me on the drive home. I had never considered the broader implications of my fight. I was just trying to protect myself, to ensure that emergency services could reach me if needed. But in doing so, I had inadvertently sparked a movement that improved safety for thousands of people. When I got home, I hung the commendation plaque next to the one from the community barbecue. Looking at them together, I felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond personal victory. I had made a difference, not just for myself, but for others. The seasons changed. Fall arrived with its cool temperatures and changing leaves. The community organized a Halloween event for the kids, with decorated houses and a costume parade. I participated, setting up a display in my front yard with lights and music. Children ran laughing through the streets, their parents chatting and enjoying the evening. It was the kind of scene that made suburban life worthwhile, the kind of community connection that an HOA should foster rather than destroy. In November, proper elections were held for the HOA board. Marcus, Tom, and Jennifer all ran for re-election and won easily. 2 new board members were also elected, both reasonable people committed to transparent governance. The community had learned its lesson about the importance of choosing leaders wisely. The first major decision of the newly elected board was to establish term limits and require annual financial audits. They also created a homeowner bill of rights, guaranteeing due process for any violations and limiting the board's authority to impose fines without proper review. These reforms were not just symbolic. They represented a fundamental shift in how the HOA operated, from a top-down authoritarian structure to a democratic organization accountable to its members. December brought snow and holiday decorations. The community held a tree lighting ceremony in the common area, complete with hot chocolate and caroling. Mrs. Patterson brought cookies. The Santos family led the singing. Tom dressed as Santa Claus for the kids. I stood in the crowd, warm drink in hand, looking around at the faces of my neighbors. These were good people who had been trapped under bad leadership. Now they were free to build the kind of community they wanted to live in. As the new year approached, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened since I moved to Meadowbrook Estates. The conflict with Karen, the county violations, the embezzlement investigation, the arrests, the reforms, the national attention. It had been exhausting and stressful, but ultimately worthwhile. On New Year's Eve, the community held a block party. As midnight approached, someone suggested a toast. Tom raised his glass. "To new beginnings and holding our leaders accountable." Everyone drank to that. Marcus added, "To Isaac, for having the courage to fight back when it mattered." More drinks, more applause. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "And to all of us," Jennifer said, "for proving that communities can change for the better when people work together." That was the perfect sentiment. As the countdown began and fireworks lit up the sky at midnight, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Not just my future, but the future of Meadowbrook Estates and communities like it across the country. The fight with the HOA had started over something simple: emergency access signs that the county required and Karen had removed. But it became about so much more. It became about dignity, accountability, and the right to live peacefully in your own home without fear of arbitrary punishment from petty officials. In the end, the county had fined the HOA $50,000 initially, before reducing it to $10,000 after the community took corrective action. Karen had gone to prison for embezzlement. The HOA had been reformed from top to bottom. And I had become an unlikely advocate for HOA reform across the country. None of it would have happened if I had just accepted Karen's decision to remove my signs. If I had backed down, paid the retaliation fines, and kept quiet, she would still be in power. The embezzlement would have continued. Other homeowners would still be living in fear, but I did not back down. I stood up, escalated when necessary, and fought for what was right, and it made all the difference. As I walked home from the block party, the emergency access signs glowed brightly in the darkness, marking the route that could save my life someday. They were a symbol of everything I had fought for: safety, security, and the principle that some things are more important than following orders. I went inside, locked the door, and looked around my house. It was truly home now in a way it had not been before. I was not just living here. I belonged here, part of a community that had been tested and had emerged stronger. The story could have ended differently. Karen could have won. The HOA could have continued its corrupt practices. The county could have imposed crippling fines that destroyed the community's finances. I could have given up and moved away, but none of those things happened. Instead, good people stood together, held bad actors accountable, and built something better. That night, I slept peacefully, knowing that if I ever needed help, the emergency responders would be able to find me quickly, guided by the signs that had started everything. And I slept knowing that I lived in a community of neighbors who looked out for each other, not subjects ruled by a petty tyrant. The emergency access signs had been removed on May 15th. By January 1st, they were back in place, better than ever, and the HOA that removed them had been completely transformed. Karen Whitfield was in prison. The embezzled funds had been recovered, and the community was thriving under ethical leadership. It had taken courage, persistence, and the willingness to escalate a simple dispute into a county-level conflict. But it had been worth every difficult moment, because in the end, standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. And sometimes, one person's refusal to back down can change everything. I never intended to become a symbol of HOA resistance. I just wanted to protect myself and honor the memory of my wife by ensuring that emergency services would never again be delayed in reaching someone who needed help. But in pursuing that simple goal, I helped expose corruption, reform a broken system, and inspire others to fight for their rights. The signs would stand as long as I lived in that house, marking not just an emergency access route, but the path from oppression to accountability, from fear to confidence, from a broken community to a thriving one. And that was the real victory. Not the fines against the HOA, not Karen's imprisonment, not the national attention. The real victory was the transformation of Meadowbrook Estates from a place where people were afraid to stand up for themselves into a place where neighbors supported each other, and leaders served rather than ruled. As winter deepened and life continued its normal rhythms, I remained grateful for that cold morning when I discovered my signs were missing. It had seemed like a disaster at the time, but it turned out to be an opportunity, a chance to make things right, not just for myself, but for everyone. The emergency access signs glowed in the darkness, standing watch over my home and my community. They were more than metal and paint. They were a testament to the power of standing up for what is right, even when it is hard, even when you are standing alone at first. But I had not been alone for long. Tom had stood with me, then Marcus and Jennifer, then the whole community. Together, we had proven that change was possible, that corruption could be exposed, and that ordinary people could hold their leaders accountable. The story of those signs would be told for years in Meadowbrook Estates, a reminder of what happened when someone finally said no to Karen Whitfield, and what that single act of defiance had unleashed. It was a cautionary tale for future board members and an inspiring story for future residents. And for me, it was proof that choosing this house, this community, had been the right decision after all. Not because it was perfect when I arrived, but because it had the potential to become something better, and because I had been given the chance to help make that happen. The emergency access signs would remain in place, properly maintained and county approved, for as long as I owned the property. And every time I looked at them, I would remember not just the conflict they had sparked, but the positive change that had resulted from one person's decision to stand firm on principle. That was the legacy of the great Meadowbrook Estates HOA battle. Not destruction, but renewal. Not division, but unity. Not defeat, but victory, hard-won and thoroughly deserved. The community had learned that accountability mattered, that rules had to make sense, and that leadership was a privilege to be earned, not a right to be abused. And somewhere in a prison in Marysville, Karen Whitfield had learned that actions have consequences, that stealing from your neighbors leads to justice, and that the power she thought was absolute had always been conditional on the consent of the people she claimed to serve. The final tally was clear. The HOA had been fined $50,000 by the county, later reduced to $10,000 after compliance. Karen had been sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to repay over $60,000. The community had been reformed from top to bottom, with new leadership and new policies designed to prevent future abuse. But more important than the numbers was the change in culture. Meadowbrook Estates was no longer a place where residents lived in fear of arbitrary fines and harassment. It was a community where people worked together, where leaders listened, and where everyone understood that the purpose of an HOA was to enhance the quality of life, not diminish it. My emergency access sign stood as a reminder of all that, visible proof that sometimes the smallest battles can have the biggest consequences, and that standing up for yourself is never wasted effort, even when it seems difficult or frightening at first. The fight had been worth it, every stressful moment and every difficult confrontation, because it had resulted in something genuinely better for everyone involved. As I settled into life in the transformed community, I knew that I had found what I was looking for when I bought the house. A place where I could live safely, peacefully, and without fear. The journey to get there had been unexpected and challenging, but the destination was exactly what I needed. The emergency access signs would stand, the community would thrive, and the lessons learned would endure. That was enough. That was everything.